The Fest Chronicles we on. The Fest Chronicles, it's time to go. And it's that podcast, hosted by Jeffrey Jones. The best in travel adventure. You go, you tell them we sent you. Them activities you show to remember. Hey, when it comes to the festivals, you know who really got it. A unique inside perspective is what we really talking. Whether that's wine or film, music or the food. Celebrating different cultures, bring it all to you. 30 to 45 minutes of your time. We go behind the scenes to meet who makes it shine. Give it a listen and chill. We the ones trotting the globe. Everything that's going on, bringing it right to your home.
Hey folks, welcome to this episode of the Fest Chronicles. We have a really great show for you today. We're going to give you the story of how the John Coltrane International Jazz and Blues Festivals came to be. First off, I myself, growing up, I never really recall having exposure to John Coltrane or the jazz music scene for that matter. I grew up in a household where it was pretty much Motown or music similar to the Motown sound. But in the early 90s, I can remember watching a documentary about jazz, and John Coltrane was talked about extensively, what his contribution was to that genre of music. But as I was watching it, I remember the very first time I even heard the name John Coltrane. And believe it or not, it came from a very famous hip-hop group by the name of Public Enemy. And their song was titled Don't Believe the Hype. And in that song, Chuck D has the line where he says, "Writers treat me like Coltrane, insane." And at the time when I heard that, I never knew what that meant or what he was referencing. But after watching that documentary, it reminded me that that was my first exposure to the name of John Coltrane. Our guest today will shine some light on John Coltrane and his early life in the city of High Point, North Carolina. John Coltrane International Jazz and Blues Festival was created to honor him in the town of High Point, North Carolina. Today, we will talk with Joe Williams of the John Coltrane International Jazz and Blues Festival. Now, this festival is going to take place in High Point, North Carolina, at Oak Hollow Park, August 30th through the 31st, 2025. And this will be the 14th annual festival. Our guest today will tell us a little bit about or a whole lot about the International Jazz Festival, the John Coltrane International Jazz and Blues Festival. So let's give a welcome to Joe Williams. Thank you for joining the Fest Chronicles.
Jeffrey, thank you for having me.
Now, I wonder a little bit, first, let's get to know you and your involvement with the festival. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started? And
I try to give you a quick rundown. I think everybody wonders when they get in the entertainment business, where did it start? So when I kind of rewind things, remember hearing my father sing in the shower and my mother's playing albums, and I just seemed to have an affection to vocalists. And then one of my grade school friends was a guy named Larry Miles that sang, and I heard him singing in the background. I was like, oh wow, this guy can sing. And he became one of my best friends. And everywhere I go, I would say, sing, sing, sing. And I still hear I Wish It Would Rain in my ear, because that's the song that he used to sing. So I think that's kind of the starting point. Then went to junior high school. My teacher, choir teacher, which I couldn't sing, did background for Billy Paul and the Dandridge Ensemble, and she would always talk about her experiences. And as I grew older, that choir instructor became a friend. We would stay in touch, even when I wanted to, moved on to high school. So I got a call from her one year or a couple months before the school season ended. Said, "Joe, would you like to work at at the record company. They got a summer job. I said, great. So my first job in high school was at Philly International Records. So that's where I was truly exposed to the best of the best. You know, how you record from Bunny Signer, The Intruders, Kenny Gamble, Tommy Bell. You know, you would just see all these great artists coming in to write. So, you know, Philly International was, besides the Teddy Pendergrass and all the great hits, they were really a writing factor. I mean, you had, you know, I remember um Buddy Miles coming in. I remember Nancy Wilson coming in, and they would all go into these writing sessions. And this is where how some of these great songs were created. So that's my first. And then moving on to college, stayed in touch with folks at Philly International Records. Every time I came home from the summer, I had tickets to the Spectrum, to all the shows. And I had a buddy in high school that played the trumpet and sang. And I thought he had the most incredible voice. And as we stayed in touch, he said, Joe, let's try to do it. So when I graduated college or leaving college, he says, man, I need you to be my manager. And I said, sure, let's go for it. I remember going out to LA, the suitcase, polka dot tie, black suit, knocking on Quincy Jones' door, wanting to speak to Mr. Jones because I want him to sign my artist. You know, that's when you're naive, you're bold. Yes, I love that. You know, you just kind of you're invincible. You're just going to try anything because you don't know any better. And I remember the executive secretary thought it was cute. You know, like, isn't this cute? This is just, you know, these guys coming from all the way from Philadelphia, come to L.A. Looking for, you know, I guess fame and fortune. I guess that didn't turn anything, but I got introduced to other people, and I shortly learned that the industry was not just made up of the super executives. The key was the secretaries. So I had secretary friends that knew other, like Larkin Arnold's executive secretary. And then, you know, it was just that network that would get me into meetings or intro, introductions to people that would be very difficult. That I would run into people in LA, man, how did you get to meet them, man? I lived here all my life and I couldn't get a chance to meet them. So that's kind of how my kind of career started. So eventually got this artist signed to A&M Records, and um, then I started managing a gospel artist, Douglas Miller. I did a little bit of had Melba Moore for a short period of time. Started managing producers, and it was just not a planned career. It just kind of kept happening, just through relationships and relationships. You know, remember going to the Jack the Rapper conference and didn't know anybody. You know, you kind of sit on the wall and, you know, like these people walking up, hugging each other. They knew each other for years and like, man, you know, I don't know anybody here. And then you look around and there's another guy that looked like you know, so you go over and introduce yourself and you become friends. Next time you come, you know, you all know each other. So now you're part of this group of hugging people, and that you may not have seen them since the last conference. And you know, one of them became head of promotions for Madonna's label. One of them became pretty big in the publishing world, and you know, so the business is really a networking business, and it just kind of grew. Nothing was planned. It's just relationships. You're getting phone calls out of the blue saying, "Hey, man, I want you to do this." You know, so those good relationships, and if they trust you and you trust them, that's how a great deal of business is done in this business. At least for me, anyway. So moving forward, fast forward, managed artists, left Philly in college, worked as a bank examiner, hated it, started managing artists, wound up managing a recording studio out of DC, continuing to managing producers, and I traveled a great deal. And it's like, wow, I wish I could do something here. So I did open up a club in the North Carolina area for a while, and I was able to bring in up and coming talent, before they were the superstars, like Stacey Lattisaw and Keith Sweat and Tony. So my relationships in the record industry allowed me, when these folks were coming on tour, to come into my club. So people were like, how are you getting these folks into your club? It was just relationships again. Moving on from there, I had a meeting one day and someone said, would you like to be on a board to get to honor John Coltrane? I'm like, John Coltrane? He's from Philly, because that's where I'm from. That's all I always heard about John Coltrane in Philadelphia. I actually knew where his house was. And I was just amazed that he grew up in the city that I'm actually living. So I started calling record execs, buddies I knew in the industry, and nobody knew that John Coltrane was raised in High Point, North Carolina.
Wow.
Um, and it was just baffling to me that there was not pictures of John Coltrane. Going into the store, didn't see stuff about John Coltrane. It was just nothing about John Coltrane. And I've been in the Carolinas for quite some time. My wife is from North Carolina. So that was really baffling. And I kind of felt like I need to tell somebody, if that makes any sense. So we got the statue downtown High Point, on the corner of City Hall. And after that was accomplished, and the people came from Japan to the unveiling, and people just came from different places just to participate in that unveiling.
That's
And
amazing.
and it was, so after that, it just kind of died. So we had a meeting, and everyone was like, gosh, we got some momentum. What do we do next? And just so happened I'm the only music guy. It was, city council, was, folks involved in the furniture business, because High Point is the furniture capital of the world. It was these kind of people at the table. I said we should do an event. And, what came to mind was a festival. And in that room, a lot of people didn't really know what a festival was. They didn't know the difference between a live concert and a festival. So the conversation was, hey, Jill, will you look into it and see what, if is this a reality? Is it possible? And once I came back with my research and gave them numbers, it quickly got quiet.
Wow.
um, so 2 years went by, and so nothing ever happened. No one ever raised any money or anything like to do anything. And I got a call, said, "Hey, Jill, would you be willing to have another meeting to talk about, the idea of honoring John Coltrane again?" And I said, sure. They had a meeting, and foundation said, hey, if y'all raise XYZ, we'll match it. Yeah, nothing ever happened. And, no one raised any money. And then I got another call, say, hey, well, what would it take? Just take a leap of faith to kind of, let's do one. Let's just get this thing off the ground. And I said, sure, let's. They didn't have a lot of money, but it was enough to say, hey, let's go try it. This is, I never received anything. I was just excited about getting the word out. And I thought the best way to honor him in the city that he grew up would be to do a festival. Uh, From that, I called friends. I had a buddy that used to run one of the key people at Quest Records. Circle back. That's the place I went to when I was first getting started. But he wound up running the head of promotions for Quest Records, and he said, "Joe, I did not know Coltrane grew up in High Point. Who could I possibly get?" He said, "Look, I know Patty's Austin's manager really well. I'll make an introduction." And the introduction said, "Hey, here's the deal. Did you know that John Coltrane was from me?" He's like, "No, I didn't know either. This is what we're trying to do, trying to honor him. It's just a shame that people did not know this. And so my mission is to launch a festival honoring the name of John Coltrane." Said, "Don't have a lot of money, but this is what we do have. Can we make it work?" And they said yes. And I went around, made calls like that, and and amazingly, more people came on board than I could have ever imagined. So that was the first festival.
Wow.
And people thought it was a fluke. Okay, people in the city, because you don't know you don't appreciate what you have, because he wasn't a big deal to them, the people that lived in the community, or they didn't understand how big he was. Um, so the first festival happened, and I remember um, hearing the rumors that, hey man, this is not gonna last. This is probably it. And I start making calls again, and I wanted George to do the first. Actually, I wanted George to do the first festival, but it couldn't happen. He wasn't available. So I reached out again and finally got to him, to his manager and everything, and they got back to me and said, Joe, yeah, that he would do it. And then got another call. So how do you feel about him coming with Stanley Clark? And, and I was like, how do I feel about him coming with Stanley Clark? That was just a gift that kept on giving.
Right.
So as I moved forward, and it stopped me if I'm finally made that happen. We signed the contract and everything was in place. And then a month before the festival, George Duke's wife passed. And I was like, oh no, he's going to cancel. I just, it's understandable that he would cancel.
Right.
But he didn't. They got back to me and said, no, he wanted to stay busy. He just did not want to, he just wanted to stay busy. So then I got another call, said, look, he doesn't want to he has a big window between one concert and the next. How do you feel? And are you able to accommodate him if he came in early? So he came in a week early. I said, great. Look, no problem. We'll take care of it. So put him up in the hotel and we just hung out. I tell the story to everybody. I mean, it was one of the most special moments in my career to hang out with him. And we spent a week together. We went to the movies together. He and Stanley, they did interviews for me. I mean, they just shared knowledge. And then I still remember the one evening that I thought, man, I'm just spending too much time with him. Let me give him some space. He probably wants to be by himself. So I said, George, look, I don't want to take up any more of your time. And he said, no, Joe. Man, I don't want to go to my room, because I'm gonna just sit in that room and start thinking. Let's just sit and have a bottle of wine. And we did. And he just, it was he gave me so much respect for him. I had it before, but when you think of somebody that could brag and could have a big head and could, because he's that guy. And he was as humble as you get, and he just simplified it. And because somebody came over and saw it was him and wanted to introduce him, and I want to guard him, I want to make sure that people don't bother him if he really doesn't want to. He said, no. He said, Joe, look, guys, I'm just a keyboard player. He just broke it down and started asking them questions. So that moment. If I ever thought I had a big head, if I ever thought that I accomplished something, you know, you just got to be humble. You just got to remember that you're just a person. And I take those moments with him with a lot of things that I do. How do you treat people? Treat people with respect, and remember, no one's better than anybody else.
Wow, that is amazing. So that was the first year, or the first
That
or
was the
second year?
second year. That was the
Second year.
second year. Yeah.
Okay.
So the second year, then we went from, after that, the phone started ringing, instead of me just calling. You start getting calls from people. Man, I heard about the festival. And it was organic. It was people that came that really enjoyed themselves and they told other people. So the next year just started growing and, still had to call people, but I still started getting calls from all over the world uh, about the festival. And now we're in our 14th year, actually 14 and a half because we lost one during the COVID and we did a virtual event. But we're now number 14.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, actually, and we've been really fortunate,
Well, you're doing a good thing.
Jerome,
Yeah.
Yeah, Al Jarreau, we had Pharoah Sanders, we had Joey DeFrancisco, all these people that are no longer here with us. We got them. And I just wish George was still here that I can bring him back and say, hey, look at what we've done.
Right.
And well, I am bringing back. So half of it is coming true because I'm bringing Stanley Clark back this year. This is the first time him coming back since George Duke's passing, or the last time that they performed.
Oh, okay. Wow. Now that's going to be exciting. Okay,
Yeah, that's gonna be memorable. Yeah.
let me take it back to something you said earlier. You talked about, well, it's two things, two-part question. You said people just didn't know about John Coltrane. Can you go more into that? What was it like for John Coltrane, in your opinion, or maybe what you've heard growing up in High Point? And does he still have family there? Is there
Well, it's
somebody?
not fair, but the house that he grew up is still there. And that's still a place that a lot of people like to visit. The school that he attended is now pretty much like a school of the arts. They built a recording studio there. They do the youth Coltrane workshop every year. So his legacy is there, and I think that hope that we're playing a part of shining the light on who John Coltrane was and how did he get there. And it's a missing story because if you listen, you start researching John Coltrane, you hear born in Hamlet, which is in North Carolina, and then you hear Philadelphia in New York. That's all you hear. You don't that middle piece, those developmental years, you just don't hear much about. And for me, Coltrane developmental years came up in High Point. From I think he came born in Hamlet at 3 years old, came to High Point, and then in High Point all through high school, and then left to Philadelphia. I think he joined the Navy. So all his developmental years and people that I've ran into that knew him said he was always practicing. I think his father, his grandfather was a pastor, and they were in the choirs, or they were musicians in the church. So his background, his foundation came from the church. Like so many of our great artists, the church was the foundation, and I think in this case it was as well. And then that answers a lot of questions because John Coltrane has a lot of spirituality with connected to him. Um, so so when I think of John Coltrane, and a lot of people say jazz, and use I don't put him in a box because to me he was, if I'm going to use an analogy, Star Trek. He's that guy that just want to travel around the universe and stop at different places and pick up sounds and how people play, and he would go from here to there. He was an explorer, and that's what he created, a way of playing that no one has ever done before. And if you talk to Common on one side, and then you go over to Carlos Santana, if you read any of those autobiographers or any of they give homage to John Coltrane. And there's so many people around the world that give that Coltrane, I'm gonna say, work ethics and how hard he studied and practiced to create this thing. Um, it's bigger than it's bigger than just music, or just it's just big. It's a spiritual, it's a way of life. It's just so many things. And I remember got a call from Kirk Whalum one time. He was coming in town for another event and reached out to me and said, Joe, I would like to go to Coltrane's house. And I was able to get the key, and just me and him went in there. We just walked around, and it has pictures of him when he was younger and pictures of the church and things like that. And it meant so much to Kurt. It was just he felt him in the air. It was just an emotional moment, and I gave him some private time in there, but afterwards he just shared how much that meant to him.
Wow.
Um, So it's just, so I'm just happy to be a part of that message and letting people know around the world where those developmental years were, and what, and tell young people, if you work hard and you practice and you practice, and you go over and beyond. um it's every, these superstars, they all have some one thing that's in common. It's that work ethics, from basketball to engineering, those people that just kind of rise to the top. It's a certain work ethics that they have. And that's what I kind of take from John Coltrane. Believe in something and keep at it and work hard at it. And if you do, good things will happen from it.
Well, I'm sure he'd be really feel really honored by what you guys have done in putting on this festival. Now, I want to circle back to one more question or something else that you said before we get into the festival details. You mentioned a lot of people didn't realize how big he was. Can you give our audience a sense of how big he was at his peak?
I don't know if he ever peaked. When I say that, I'm not being facetious. When I say that, I just think that he's growing. I mean, they released 2 albums of Coltrane's, since he's been passed, the two that I know of, and they sold more records than it did when he was alive.
Wow.
So he's still growing, and more people are discovering him, and it's growing, and it's continuing to grow. So I don't know if he had a, I don't know if peak is the right word. I think that because he did something special. He created something. He's like the AI of his time. He created.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love that analogy. That's great. That's great.
yeah, and it keeps learning. You know what I mean? People are learning from him and what he's done, and what he's created and how he played, and you know, um, I mean, I think of Pancho Sanchez. He just loved John Coltrane, and he tried to duplicate some of the things that he's done on his percussions. Um, it's the list goes on, and I can't even talk about how many people he's touched. But everywhere I travel, and I mention, that we put on this Coltrane Jazz and Blues Festival, and you hear these stories. There's a Coltrane church in San Francisco.
Are you serious?
Yes, if you
Wow.
research it, yeah, there's a church, a Coltrane church. So it's not just in the U.S., it's around the world. He spent time in Japan, I believe. So it's just a lot bigger, and it's not, it's private too to a lot of people. You know what I mean? It's just something that they do in their corner, and when they're practicing, and it's not, I don't know if it's something that we would ever really know how big it is.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. Going into the festival now, this is the 14th year. And so I was doing some research on it, and the festival the setting is in in High Point at a
Yeah,
park, Ocala. What's that about? What's
Yeah,
Ocala all about?
it's Ocala is a park in the center of High Point, and it's surrounded by a lake. So we were talking about doing the festival, trying to determine where should we do it. We didn't want it to be an indoor event, and we didn't want it to be kind of something just in the streets. And this park was there that was actually very close to where I live, and everybody talked about it. And we all agreed that this is the place, not too big, not too small, and it's water. I mean, anything looks better when it's surrounded by water. If you go out in the park and you got water versus a park that just has grass, that water makes a big difference. So it's a beautiful setting. It just has its own majestic vibe to it, meaning when in the daytime it's one way, and then when the sun goes down it starts getting darker, and the steam and the mist from the lake comes up. And when you do a festival and you do your lighting, you like to put smoke because it just kind of highlights the lights. It has its own little natural mist that seems to happen, and then the festival transforms into this, really wonderful evening, and the sound from off the water. I just really can't describe it. It's just
Wow. Well,
perfect.
you're describing you
Yeah,
you are describing it really well because you
yeah,
you have me in La La Land. I'm forgetting I'm doing an interview. I'm like, man, what is this?
yeah.
He's talking about, but yeah, something that I hope the audience wants to see. I definitely want to see that. So, what is the capacity for the park?
Well, the park will hold, I would say, 10,000 people comfortably.
Right. Okay.
I mean,
Wow.
it's a park, so you can actually go, but is every place a great visual seat. So we bring in jumbotrons, we bring in a big stage, we bring in vendors, we bring in golf carts, and we just kind of transform this park into something special, once a year.
Wow, that sounds awesome. So, okay, so when you decide that you're going to, as you put the festival on, how do you decide the mix of jazz, blues, R&B? I think I saw that you had hip hop in there. Am I correct on that, or did?
Not hip, we have people that are, may have influence. This year we have Jose James, which has kind of a hip hop influence. We had Bilal before. I just think that one thing that I think helps me, because I produce the shows and I pick the talent and things like that, is in my years of things that you do when you're younger, you don't think that it would have any meaning. But my years around, say, Philly International, hearing the music, because when you're around it, I was in charge of the records and the promos and things like that. So all day I'm listening to music, and all of the artists that were on the label, they would come to me to get their free copies of the promos and things like that. So I think that you develop an ear, and that's just something that you can't buy. What is good? I mean, you got to know what is good. And fortunately, I think I've developed an ear that I don't have to rely on what somebody else is doing. I just go through tons of music and video, and it's kind of like a puzzle, and you just kind of put these pieces together, and then it feels right, from smooth jazz to contemporary, or someone that may have a jazz and an R&B influence. We had Patty before, but it's all about the music and the integrity of the music. And I still remember when Gregory Porter came out, nobody really knew who he was, and I heard him, and I booked him on the Fourth Festival, somewhere around there. Think he just won a Grammy, but nobody knew he won a Grammy. It wasn't really recognized. And people were asking me, "Who's this guy you bringing that wear these earmuffs?" I mean, because I don't know if you know Greg Reporter, he kind of wears these earmuffs for whatever reason, but it makes him unique. And he came on stage and he opened up his mouth, and one of the first times this has ever happened, it was dead silence in the whole park. With his voice, he just captivated everyone. It was like you could hear a pin drop. You could hear somebody cough throughout the whole park. It was just that wonderful, and I just smiled because he got five standing ovations. And I think something about the water may help. You know what I mean? With
Uh-huh.
the whole, I think all of those, it just gets a great sounding, and people still, I brought him back three times since then, but people still talk about those memorable moments. And um, I think that I try to put pieces together that we can create something that you haven't heard before. I never try to grab a lineup that you see somewhere else and just bring it to us. I just always try to mix it up. And I remember bringing David Sanborn and Marcus Miller, and a lot of people didn't know that. Um, Marcus was in David Sanborn's band, when he was up and coming, and then as Marcus developed, he kind of went on his own, but David was kind of one of his mentors, and I had him on the same night. And then David was our headliner, and then Marcus came out on stage, and they had a bass solo that was just incredible. I probably, if I was a filmmaker and I wanted to put this together, I could not have done it any better.
Wow.
Because it was just that, it was just standing ovation. People were in awe. And afterwards, I was in the RV, because we have RVs, we out in the park, and talking to David, and he says, Joe, look, let me just tell you, you got something special. Look, I've been doing, I've been everywhere. I've been doing this for a long time. Only 3 times in my career has this happened. You know, one of those magical moments.
Yes,
And,
that is beautiful. Can we find that on YouTube?
it probably is. Marcus Miller, John Coltrane Festival, and because people, on their phones, they were just in awe. So
Yes.
I'm sure it's out there. So we had a lot of those, bringing Snarky Puppy back, back. Last time I had them were real early in their career when they first won their first Grammy, and I booked Snarky and I booked Layla Hathaway, and I put them on the same night. Not that I knew that they would do something together, but I was hoping. And so Snarky was the headliner, and then so Layla performed, but she came back out on Snarky's set, and then they did that single that got them both their first Grammy.
Wow.
So, those just memorable, I got so many memorable moments that, Earl Klugh, remember having him, and he said, Joe, I do a festival down in Kiowa and something like that. He said, Joe, man, but this is not, this is just, I can't tell you. This is just special. And I don't know what it is. And people ask me that, and people say that to me. And, if I could put it in a bottle, I would definitely not be doing this. But um, I think that you treat people well, you treat them like they're coming into your home, and then the crowd do the same thing. So our festival is growing because people that have attended grab the newbies and show them the ropes and welcome them to our festival. So they treat it like this is my festival. And we take pride in our festival. We're inviting you in. We want to make sure you're comfortable because we don't have the bandwidth to do that, with staffing and things like so. Our guests that have been coming from day one, they do that for us. And I think that's the uniqueness of it. Just treating people. And I hear people, hey, I met this guy from Chicago, and I met this guy down in Buff Boston, and we hooked up and we had a good conversation. So we meeting up again this year, and we just hear those stories.
That's a testament to a really, really good festival. But let me take it back. You mentioned number of the acts that you bring on, and so what is the balance between, let's say, your legendary acts and then the emerging talent? I know you say
Well,
what is good, but how do you balance that?
always, always try to highlight somebody new because the future of music is our young people, and a lot of times they don't get an opportunity because it's about draw. You know what I mean? The bottom line is there are some incredibly talented people, but they don't have name recognition. So, you can bring them, but will they bring people to your event? So, you can't do all new talent because you probably won't have the support to cover what you need to. So, I would go to different places and I go to showcases. And I remember I was at New York, I think at APAP, and it was, you see all the different showcases that I went, and I saw this blind kid named Matthew Whitaker. He was real young. It's like, I don't know if he was 15 or 16, somewhere around there. And I was so blown away by him. I thought of Stevie Wonder, not as a singer. He just was so gifted. And I said, I gotta have him. And I remember bringing him, and nobody knew who he was. And then a year after I had him, they did a 60-minute special on him, and
Wow.
and and then it just keeps growing and growing. And so now he's, I brought him back again, but now he's one of those rising stars. He's the future. And then I went to another showcase. I remember seeing Jasmina Horn, and she wasn't well known. She didn't. I don't even think she had a record out back then. And I brought her to our festival, and so now Jasmina is one of our established, jazz artists out there. So it goes on like that. So you search for talent, and you try to fit them in a place where they can get recognized, and then one day they'll be that headliner. That's the hope.
That's just an amazing festival, and how you look out for the emerging talent coming, but you still, you know, give the props to those who have been there before and been there a long time, and you remember them. It just feels like nobody's forgotten.
I
At the
try not to,
John
and
Coltrane.
music is music. So for me, the label or the title doesn't mean as much as the music. I mean, R&B. I don't think any great, I guess, label jazz artist wants the label jazz. They want to be recognized as an incredible musician. They just want to be a great musician. They want anybody and everybody to listen to their music. And I think that that's the greatest honor, to have anybody, any race, any creed, any style. They just want anybody from any country that may not even know the language can hear their music and they can relate to it. You can tell what's good. You may not even know what they're saying. The jazz artist, it's not like they got a lyric, you know.
Right.
And the jazz artists, I guess if you put that label, they tend to be able to play anything. You know, they can jump on any set in country, rock. A jazz musician is that talented.
That is amazing. So let me ask you this. Going back to, you talked about the young Mr. Whitaker that you saw up in New York. What I really appreciate about your festival, when I was researching it, is that you really give a lot of attention to young people. You have the education, the student contest. Can you tell me a little bit about that, and what is the purpose and the vision behind it?
Oh, when you start at the festival, you start talking like, people have fundraisers and they do things and they never know what happens. So we want to do something that you can kind of touch and feel the results of any donation you may give or what the festival's doing. So for me, it was where does it start? So, you dig back, you just kind of really think about where does it start? And for me, people hear music, they may be at a church and they may hear it, but if they don't get that first instrument, it doesn't go anymore. It doesn't go anywhere else. It just, so for us, if somebody has aptitude and they may not have the means, we want to give them a brand new instrument, not a used instrument, not a brand new instrument, not a toy, not a plastic, but a real brand new instrument. And it has bared fruit because, I tell the story again. I had so it's a student essay contest, to get me back up. And if you write an essay or send a video on what music means to you, and you share that, you may not have the means, your family may not, that we make an attempt, if your letter is compelling, to try to get you a brand new instrument. So one year, a kid wrote a letter, really heartfelt letter, and I think that might have had a single mom, and he wanted a specific sax. I think he may have had sax from an old relative that didn't have work or whatever. It was something like that. And you could hear in his letter that it was sincere. And he knew what he wanted. He wanted a Joe Albright Cannonball black sax or something like that. And so I reached out to an attorney friend, or he was an exec at a entertainment company, and kind of shared my story. And he said, "Well, let me just reach out to Gerald," and he reached out to Joel Albright, and Joe Albright put put the president of Cannonball in touch with me. And he called me, and I shared the story and what I was trying to do. And he said, "Let me get back to you." We paid for it, but at a reduced rate. And he got me that saxophone. And this was the kind of backstory. I was trying to make that happen, so it took a long time. So I could not tell him he won until I knew I can get a sax. So this was a week leading up to the festival,
Wow.
and it happened maybe 4 days prior to the festival. This happened. He overnighted the sax to me. I was able to contact them and let him know. And the mother was, kind of in tears, and the kid was just, he just didn't believe it was happening. And then afterwards, I remember the mother contacted me and said, "Joe, this changed his life." He said grades improved. Everywhere he goes, he walks around with a saxophone. He wants to play for people, but it gave him so much pride. One is excuse me, a brand new instrument, and it was a dream come true. And so those are the kind of miracles. And then it's like, we're not going to say a miracle, but good stories that happen from just doing something. And he's going to do something good for somebody somewhere else because of that one experience. And then I have a young kid that's in Yale for music, and now it's because it's now 14 years. A lot of these students that want instruments, you hear different stories from other people. "Oh man, I met the guy. They were telling us about his experience about winning an instrument," because we bring him up on stage, we let everybody see him, and we let everybody clap and cheer, and we tell a little bit about their letter, and they get to go backstage and they talk to some of the artists, and you hear one kid say, "Man, Kenny G, man, spend some time with me. I mean, I just couldn't believe this is Kenny G, and he's talking to me." And then Branford Marcellus pulled the young kid and just spent some time with him. And another kid that played the bass, Marcus Miller, gave him his number and sat with him. And to this day, from what I hear, he can contact Marcus, and Marcus will get back to him. So these are just wonderful things, and it makes it all worthwhile.
Man, it's one of the best stories I've ever heard about a festival. And I know there are many festivals that do, charitable works and so forth, but this is really touching. And I'm just so happy to get a chance to interview you and talk to you about the festival. Now, let me go into this. So your lineup, and people can go to the website. Can you get the website?
ColtraneJazzFest.com.
ColtraneJazzFest.com. They'll get to see the lineups, but let me say this. Let me ask you this. You have a ear for talent, so everybody you bring is good. I know that, but I'm going to have to put you on the spot. Who would you tell people if they're like planning to come, not just from North Carolina, but they hear this podcast and they say, "Hey, you know what? We're going to go check out this festival." Who would you say, "Hey, don't miss this emerging act," or just like, "Hey, you better not miss this act"?
I think the beauty of our festival, you give the titles headliners and things like that, but I think all of them are headliners in their own right. So they might be in a small city, they're going to headline that particular festival or that event, or they're going to do the one-offs by themselves. So I think everybody that we brought can stand on their own. Um, Unfortunately, you have to put someone before and you got to put someone after. I don't think I can pick one because every one of them have touched me in a certain way. I know um, on Saturday, you know, Liz Wright, I remember in New York, and she just has one of those enchanting voices that just, there are people that sing and there are people that sing from their soul, and it's a difference, just one of those voices that put chills or your hair starts, you can just kind of feel it because they sing with so much emotion and soul. So Liz Wright is one of those artists, as I kind of described Gregory Porter. I think she's one of those voices. You have Michelle Indiogello. She's a bass player, but she's just a fantastic artist, and she's just one of those. She'll leave an impression on you. You know, I dig back deeper on Saturday, and we all. Let me say, if you in your 50s up, you all heard of the Headhunters, and I was just happy to bring them back. And we just when Herbie first got started, the Headhunters got me through college.
Okay. Okay.
Um, so then we putting together Nina Freeline with Take Six and Clinton Holmes. They're all performing together, and Snarky Puppy is just probably one of the baddest groups out there. Because they have a collective of some of the young and seasoned, and you go listen to Snarky Puppy, you said music is in good hands because they won 5 Grammys. It's not just jazz, it's funk, it's everything. They just will have you moving, and they'll keep you smiling through the whole show.
Wow. See, you do have an ear for talent. You know what's good, as you said earlier. But let me ask you this. It says they're going to be, I read on on your website, there's a celebration of Bill Withers and Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
Why is that? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that's Nina Freeline, Take Six, and Clint Holmes are coming together, and they are singing. They are honoring Stevie Wonder and Bill Withers. So they just doing all of his hits. So that's just something to look forward to. That's on Saturday, and then Sunday. As I talked to you about George Duke, Stanley Clark is coming back. And this is the first time having him since that time, and I want to impress him. I want him to see where the festival has grown since his first time appearing here, and I think everyone is kind of looking forward to it. And so that's probably meaningful to me. Is just to I want our crowd to embrace him. I want him to pay homage to George Duke. So it has all those kind of meanings for me, and I just think that we probably get something magical out of him.
Yes,
So that's
sir.
what I'm hoping for.
Oh, I'm
So
sure you're going to get it.
in new up and coming artists, we got the Ballad Project. I've been watching them for years now, and I was just watching them grow, and I think they are crossing that bridge, that mark. They're no longer the up and coming. They are that future of our music. So the Ballad Project, I think they would be my group that I would say if you haven't seen them, be spend time, learn about them, learn about their history, and you will not be disappointed. So I can tell you, I'm always a vocal lover, and Ruthie Foster she's just won a Grammy for best contemporary blues album, and she's has Aretha Franklin, a little Mahalia Jackson kind of thing in her voice, so you just can't miss that.
Right. Okay, tell me about the North Carolina All-Star Band. What I see that they're going to perform with John Brown, or led by bassist John Brown. But
Yeah.
how did they come together?
Well, every year I ran in a situation where I cannot only have 1 or 2 spots that I can give, and I can't use that for local or regional talent, you know. So what I started doing, I said, let me find one of the baddest cats in our area and have them lead and let them pick their best players and create what I call the North Carolina Coltrane All-Star Band.
I love that. I love that.
So, it gives everybody, and if you make that list, then you've accomplished something. So, I've known John. John is a tremendous, I mean, he's he's from North Carolina, and was the first what you call provost over the music department at Duke University. Gives you an idea. And he agreed to lead the Coltrane All Star. So he's bringing the big band, and then he's also bringing Jose James to as a special guest. So that's going to be just wonderful honor to have him represent North Carolina and the Coltrane All Star Band. So I have several. The every year, well, not every year, but most several of the years I've had a Coltrane All Star Band, and the young people. My big picture, and I hope to make those connections as the Coltrane All Star Band. These are teachers. These are the best of the best. I want to give these people, these young people that I give instruments to, the ability to get a lesson with one of the Coltrane All Star Band, and then hopefully they will stay in touch and they will act as a mentorship for these people that are beginning their career. Um, so that's big picture, and that's the connection and how a young person that may not have the ability to get lessons can get it through one of these all-star band members.
Wow, that is truly amazing. Great work, Joe. That is really great work. So I see that this is a festival that really probably, I mean, it benefits so many people as far as the artists and so forth. Let me ask you this. How does it benefit the High Point community economically and culturally?
Well, I think that it has grown. So now, people come from all over, like 25 different states. So the economic input, I mean, the amount of people that come and the fact that they staying in hotels and they're eating out in restaurants just has to have, from what I hear, that in High Point, we're probably the second largest event in terms of bringing people, adding, in terms of bringing income to the community. So I think it's a really, really good thing. Furniture market is the first, and we're probably the second.
Wow, that's really awesome. So I only have two more questions. I'm gonna let you go. This has been such a great conversation, and I had lost track of time. But so any festival or most festivals need sponsorship, and I'm sure you have some for this year. But are there still ways for sponsors if they said, "Hey, I want to be a part of this," to still be a part of this festival?
Yeah, absolutely. The heartbeat of a festival, are naturally are the guests, but festivals cannot survive without sponsorships. And you're probably hearing about throughout the country, grants that were available are now disappearing. And so the arts community is really kind of suffering because of that. So, we truly need the support of corporate sponsors, just jazz or music lovers that say, hey, I just want to keep this going. I want to continue to help this festival give instruments to young people. I just want to help them touch lives in the way that they are. So just go to our website, ColtraneJazzFest.com, hit donation, and $1, $5, $100, and any of you wealthy individuals, feel free um, to donate whatever you can afford to.
Great, great. So this is my last question. If somebody's thinking about coming out to the festival, what would you say, for the first time attendees, how would you want them to describe their experience after the festival?
Well, first, I think, the experience begins when you get off the plane. Or so when you get to High Point, go visit the Coltrane statue, go visit the house. Our host hotel is the Grandover Resort and Spa. Fantastic place. You get a chance to interact or meet some of the artists because it has a gigantic lobby, a piano in there, and when they get off of the show, they are not ready to go to bed. So we wind up having a little jam session out in the lobby of the hotel. So, these are this is what makes it special. I remember last year, Greg Reporter came because it rained a little bit, and he came back to the hotel and he just gave a mini concert right in the lobby afterwards. So those kind of things happen spontaneously. So I just think come to High Point, let people, treat you like family, introduce yourself, meet a friend. And I think when you leave, you'll leave with 10 more friends. And then we'll see you back again next year.
Well put. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Mr. Joe Williams from the John Coltrane International Jazz and Blues Festival, going on its going on the 14th year. So if you can, however you can get there, you're a jazz lover, Coltrane lover, blues, and all genres of music, as he explained, this sounds like an event for you. And it just sounds so beautiful off the water and everything that you mentioned. So I look forward to making it out there one day myself and
Absolutely.
keeping track.
And Jeffrey, thank you very much. This is a wonderful thing that you're doing. Please go out there and support Jeffrey. It's not many podcasts that are doing what he's doing, and it's well deserved. So thank you again for having me.
Oh, I appreciate it. With that, we'll let you go. And folks, stay on top of the festival, and hopefully you can make it out there and support Mr. Williams and the Friends of John Coltrane.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Fest Chronicles, where festivals come to life through the voices of the people who make the magic happen behind the scenes. If you enjoyed today's journey, click that like button, hit subscribe on YouTube, and follow us on Spotify so you never miss the next festival adventure. And hey, don't keep all the fun to yourself. Share this episode with a friend or family member you love going to festivals with. Until next time, keep showing up, keep creating joy, and keep believing in the power of community, one celebration at a time.